invasive plant species are really wreaking havoc around the property. And so that is one of my ongoing battles, both along the edges of the fields, as well as creeping through the wooded areas. The problem with them is they crowd out the native species that otherwise would grow well here, and they end up taking over because there aren't the predators, so to speak, or the wildlife that eats these plants the way there are in the parts of the world where they exist naturally. Now, I just mixed up 2 gallons of Roundup from concentrate. Now, this is, I guess, a different formulation than typical Roundup, which was glyphosate, which I think is the name of the chemical, and you could still get that chemical. But this actually is a blend of triclopyr triethylamine salt, which if you can pronounce this stuff, you're better than I am. Then you have fluazephat p-butyl and diquat dibromide in this particular blend of concentrate. Now, what I have found is that there are different herbicides that'll work better on different invasive species. Now, the invasive plants that I'm dealing with a lot include oriental bittersweet, Japanese barberry, burning bush, and then on top of that, we've got some glossy buckthorn. We've got what I think is some autumn olive. So basically around my property, we have the kitchen sink of all of the invasive plant species that exist in New Hampshire. Now, in my experience, the glyphosate, the old school traditional Roundup, will actually kill the Japanese barberries just fine. You want to get into the burning bush, you need something like that triclopyr triethylamine salt. So that's in this mix of Roundup. It's also in Ortho Ground Clear. I've used Ortho Ground Clear in the past pretty effectively. That's the tough brush. So anything that's sort of the tough brush killer. This particular Roundup you mix at 6 ounces of concentrate per gallon of water. So I've mixed that up. We're gonna go head out back and start hitting some of these invasive plants. So I'll identify them and spray them kind of as we go. And as you're gonna see, I've got them all over back there. I will say herbicide is only one mechanism that I'm using to control these invasives. There's also cutting, mowing them down, pulling them out. I'm doing all of it. This is just one technique. I'm specifically going to be targeting Japanese barberry today. And the reason I target that with spray is because it's got a lot of thorns and it's just nasty to pull out. It's nasty to kind of mow around the bushes of it as well, because they'll catch your skin, it tears you. It's just awful. So I'm going to be spraying those and hopefully they're going to die right off. And where do these invasives come from? Well, they got here because generally at some point somebody said, hey, that plant's pretty. I want to bring that and plant it in my property, in my landscaping. In fact, about a year ago, I took out 2 burning bush that were right here in front of the house by the front door. And I actually cut those down with the chainsaw, and I took that Ortho Ground Clear concentrate and I painted it onto the cut off stump with a paintbrush. So this was a full strength concentrate. And I'll show you how these look now, because normally you cut them down, they start regrowing shoots. And that's where that herbicide comes in real handy. So this is one of our burning bush stumps right here. Totally dead, starting to rot. Very successful kill there. And coming to the other side here, here's the other. Same thing. So cutting it off and coating the stump with that full strength Ortho Ground Clear, which is a triclopyr triethylamine salt based herbicide, was effective in killing these right off. So we've reached the entrance to my lower field. Most of where I'm targeting is way down over there amongst the maples. That's where a lot of that Japanese barberry is. But we're gonna start on this side and just work down this stone wall on the way there. And just right here at the entrance, what we're looking at right here is some burning bush. So that's what we got there. This looks to me like it's quite possibly the oriental bittersweet coming up here. And then if I spin around to this side, right here at the entrance, I believe that this right here is autumn olive. This is also invasive. We got kind of the silvery underside there. That's more of a shrub. Those stems are big. I wouldn't be spraying that. That just needs to be cut out and maybe dealt with herbicide on the stump. More burning bush right in here. So this entire area, I mean, it's all just loaded. As you look down there, what you're seeing, quite a darn lot of it, in fact, even most of it, is invasive species. Let's go ahead and hit this stuff here at the entrance. So working down this stone wall, here's our first Japanese barberry right here. Ouch, I just got a thorn in my thumb, just like that. So we'll go ahead and spray this guy. Here's another vine. You can see that trying to climb. That's our bittersweet. Another one right there. I try to avoid the overspray as much as I can, but it's difficult. So this here is a much larger Japanese barberry plant. And I'll show you why I really don't like these. So on this dead wood, I don't know if you can see that, but that's a thorn. Now this one's old and brittle, so it's snapped off. But if you find, you can't hardly see them the way that the leaves are. But you'll get sharp thorns kind of hidden in these clusters of leaves. I don't know if you can see it, but it's right there. I mean, if you get walking by this, it tears your arm up something fierce. So this gets heavily sprayed to get this thing out of here. Here you can see the fruit's not set, but this will fruit, and those will all be seeds to spread this barberry. Some more burning bush right here. The insidious thing about the bittersweet, you can see starting right here. That vine right there is just starting to go up. What it'll do is it'll go right up that oak tree, kind of like you see right here, and climb up, and ultimately it can choke and damage these trees. So I'm only spreading it at ground level. Really, ideally, I would come in here and cut this off as well, but I'm not doing that tonight. Just gonna hit it with some spray and we'll see what effect that has. The bittersweet is pretty much the hardest thing to kill that I've encountered. Turned out there was more along that initial stone wall than I had thought about. I've used up 3/4 of a gallon almost already of my spray. Now, I've reached the area that I really wanted to target this evening, and I'll show you around what's going on, because I've hit this area before, but we still have a lot of those Japanese barberry down here to deal with. Last year I came down here and I did target this area. This dead brush right here, this is Japanese barberry that I sprayed last year. As you look over there, you see the green lush foliage. That is Japanese barberry that I need to target right now. If I spin around this way, you'll see there's some more dead brush there, but off right over there, there's a bunch more that's alive. So there's quite a bit more to hit down here, including at the edge of the woods right behind me. So that's what I'm going to work on right now. This area is real tricky, and I'm almost getting to this about 2 weeks too late here. So we got some barberry mixed in here We got some burning bush. We probably have some bittersweet there. But what's growing here, like right there off the tip of my finger, of course the camera's not focusing right, there we go. That's milkweed. This entire area fills in with milkweed, and we actually observe monarch butterflies here, and so I don't want to do anything that harms this milkweed patch. So I'm going to go through here very carefully, try and hit these invasives without getting any of that milkweed. I've run myself out of spray now, working up this wall right here. And you may say, well, what are you gaining? Why do you even bother with this? Well, I've actually gained a lot. 2 years ago, you could not even approach that oak tree base there because it was so thick. You see all the dead in here. That's from spraying and cutting and just working at it. And yes, it is pretty devastating when you start to look at these trees here. And I just actually sprayed this pretty well, but you can see the vines have just thoroughly gone up there, and that plus the snowstorm just pulling that over. And then if we look over here, you know, that's a pine tree right there that's just being totally smothered in this stuff. And then look at this. This is a spot where it was all kind of cut out, and now we've got all this new stuff growing. But you couldn't even see this wall 2 years ago. So I have absolutely gained on it. In this corner, I burned a big fire, took out a bunch of these invasives with it. So yes, progress has been made, absolutely. I had a super huge burn pile here that spanned basically from this rock all the way down past that big stump to about where that tree is. This was totally impassable, filled with invasives. Burned it, cleaned them out of there. Now, of course, as we look at this wall, that is all invasive trying to come back. And so that's going to be a target for me too. So the next time I mix up spray, I'll be targeting this wall here to try and keep this under control. A little further down there, you see that brush? I actually want to burn another pile, hopefully next winter there, to take out more invasives there. You stand here and you just look at the devastation of these invasives. I think this is a really large autumn olive. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's what this is. There's another one there. And then just look at the vines and all this stuff hanging. It's just kind of a nightmare. So that's the downside. And here's plus side. You couldn't see this wall a couple of years ago at all. It was all overgrown just like the others that I was showing previously. And now I can mow pretty much up to this wall with the brush hog. So I have gained. I've made major gains down the sides of our property, even if I haven't done so much gaining along the back. And of course, the invasives are much thicker back there. Now, as we walk back up here, I will say that one of the other things that I am actively looking into is that NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service here in the United States, actually has some matching grants to engage in improvement projects like this, like controlling invasive species. Now, if it's in a woodland, my understanding is you must have a forest management plan in order to move through with any control activities. But this, being the edge of fields, when I talk to somebody, seemed to indicate that it doesn't necessarily need the forest management plan to be able to come in and control this. And I will say that two different people, both the folks that I had do the logging for some of the work on the barn to get the timber for that, as well as our county forester, said that this is so bad with these invasive plants that this place is essentially a candidate for a professional treatment with heavy-duty herbicides and cutting. And I think that probably investing in something like that down back there, where they're thick with the autumn olive and all of the oriental bittersweet and stuff, is probably the route that I'm going to need to go if I want to make some noticeable and substantial gains. And I'm seriously considering doing that and pursuing some kind of matching funds through NRCS. So we've been talking about invasive plants, but I also want to talk about invasive bugs. I've got an ash tree behind me, so we'll start there. So this is a white ash. And if we look up here, you'll notice that trunk totally bare. This is still alive, but this tree is done. Basically, it's time to cut this sometime this year or into this winter. There's another one right here, and this one so far is okay. Now these ash trees are affected by the emerald ash borer, and as soon as you see any of this type of blonding in the bark or damage to the bark, the tree is pretty far along the way to being done. So the woodpeckers come in and get the bugs out, but they also exit the tree, and basically they've torn up all underneath that bark. And so once you see that, it's over. The tree is pretty much gone. Another invasive insect or bug is the red pine scale. And so all my red pine is infected and dying very rapidly from the red pine scale. It's kind of similar to what the emerald ash borer is doing to the ash. So it's pretty bleak for those species in my area. The other one to keep an eye out for in my area is the hemlock woolly adelgid, which does a similar thing to the eastern hemlock trees. So there's always things to watch out for in terms of these invasive insects. And of course, a lot of work is being done to get them under control, especially the emerald ash borer. And hopefully we'll be able to save the ash trees in the future. But right now, we're losing them, and we're losing them fast. So what's the moral of the story here? Well, from my perspective, the moral of the story, if you're managing your property or managing a forest, is to avoid monoculture. What's monoculture? Well, monoculture is where you're growing all one species. Where my red pine is growing, it is the only thing that's growing there. And it's all dying, and it's all gonna die. If that was a diverse stand of timber, if the red pine died, I wouldn't lose everything. Just same thing could be said for ash. If all you have is ash and it's affected by the borer, you could lose it all. Whereas if you have species diversity, you're more robust and you're more able to withstand some of these diseases and invasive pests and things like that that come in and affect the trees. I've got trees, the beech trees, with the diseases there. So it's good to have species diversity to just maintain productive land, especially in the forest. I know this is a little different than a lot of my videos, but I think it's important, and it shows some of what goes on, just nitty-gritty behind the scenes, trying to manage the property, maintain it for the future, and really get the most out of it. So I hope you found this interesting and helpful, and hopefully you've got the spark and the desire to manage your land in a sustainable, long-term, future vision kind of way, the way that we're trying to do here on our property.